And today I'd like to continue to speak some more on the four vipallasa, or the distortions of perception. And, as I have mentioned earlier, these distortions, they can occur on three levels, or on three levels of depth. And those three levels are not necessarily hierarchical, but they're mutually reinforcing. And in a way, we could say that the whole practice is all about undoing these distortions of perception. And just going over those three levels again, because they make a lot of sense. The first one is on the level of perception, of sanya. And perception, is the capacity of the mind to remember and recognize distinguishing features of an object, so that we don't have to start from scratch every time, we see an object which looks similar to another object. We know this is a chair, or this is a table, this is a car, this is a house. And that, is very helpful, but also can lead to confusion. And this is karmically conditioned. For example, what looks to a vulture as a very wonderful meal would look to us as human beings as a very disgusting affair. So it's karmically conditioned. And confusion can happen because it's a quick take on experience. And a very well-known example is, for example, walking in the forest and seeing on the forest floor, seeing a long, thin object, and for a moment thinking it's a snake, and the body contracts and moves away, and then looking again, it turns out to be a piece of rope or a long piece of wood. So it's when we look again, it drops away. And another more tragic example, particularly here in America, is for example, many young black men get shot here by police because police is so kind of fearful and so traumatized that they see things happening which are not really happening. There's this very well-known example, a black young man pulling out a wallet, and the policeman think it's a gun and shoots the person because the perception is so kind of fearful and traumatized that it sees something which isn't there. And I have experienced that with the snake, definitely, where I for a moment thought it's a snake and then it wasn't. So it can be very, very tragic, what it entails. It's just a moment, but it can cost the life of somebody. So that's the first level. And then the second level is on the level of the mind, of chitta. And that's, the kind of thoughts which get stirred up based on a perception like that, on a distorted perception. Like, for example, for a moment, you think that piece of wood is a snake, and then you see it isn't, but you keep on, regurgitating it. They keep on thinking about it as you're walking through the forest, and it kind of dominates your mind for a certain amount of time, and then it peters out. So that's the next level of depth. And then the third one, the deepest one, is on the level of view, ditti in Pali. And that's like, phobias or obsessions, that even in the face of evidence, the mind still holds on. And, the result of that is polarizing fundamentalism and, thinking about certain groups of people, or certain things in life, certain animals, thinking about them in a way which is very stuck. For a phobia of spiders, for example. And some of it is very unconscious, where we don't know where it's coming from. For example, myself, I have a certain amount of repulsion with feathers. I just don't like feathers, and I don't really know where that's coming from. But my whole body kind of cringes and doesn't want to go near. So thoughts make views, and then because of those views, we perceive the world in a certain way. And it's interesting to get to know that, and then not necessarily, being overpowered by it, but just knowing it, and maybe, that kind of disgust or shrinking away or so on might be there, but we don't need to become it. That's the freedom, we can train ourselves in through the Buddha's teaching. And there is a particular list in the canon which explains the underlying mechanisms of this kind of repetition compulsion. And this list is called the 10 Fetters or the 10 Shackles, and sometimes also called, in Pali language, called Samyojana. And I'm just going to go over that list now with you, because it gives us a handle, on our experience. It can help us to identify the underlying forces which drag us into identification with certain ways of relating to experience. And in the Sutta Pitaka, in the Pali canon, they are called fetters of becoming, because they drag us into becoming something. And the first one is called Sakkaya Ditthi, belief in a self. So that's the most basic one. As long as someone hasn't entered the stream, there's this strong identification with me as a separate entity. The second one is doubt or uncertainty, in particular, in relationship to the Dharma teaching, in relationship to the realization of the Buddha, doubting that this is really possible, doubting that the Buddha has really, found liberation and that there's a teaching which we can follow. So having not yet really tasted the power of the liberation potential. That's the second one. And the third one is attachment to rites and rituals. Believing that if we do things a certain way and if we keep the precepts, that this is necessary, to do it like perfectly in order to realize awakening. So that's the first three, which are cut at stream entry. When we see the Dharma deeply for the first time, those three fetters are cut permanently. The belief in a self, doubt in the efficacy of the teaching and our capacity to realize it, and attachment to rites and rituals, thinking that things have to be done exactly in a certain way, otherwise we can't really realize awakening. And then the next one is sensual desire, and clinging, grasping, and wanting more of that which we like. And the fourth one is, the fifth one is ill will, is exactly the opposite, not wanting, what we don't like. And those two, sensual desire and ill will, they are they are kind of let go of to a certain extent in the second level of awakening, which is the once returner. And then the non-returner, the third level of awakening, sensual desire and ill will are completely let go of. And then only the 5 last fetters are left, and they are completely let go of for the Arahant, the fully awakened ones. And they are, the number 6 is a desire for fine material existence, and number 7 is desire for immaterial existence. And both of them, they are about very refined states in meditation, absorptions, jhanas, and they can be extremely pleasurable, and there can be an attachment to that. So that's number 6 and 7. And then number 8 is conceit, mana in Pali. And that's about, comparing oneself with others as being better than, or being worse than, or being the same as. So that kind of comparing mind. It's quite a high fetter, in this list. Then the next one is restlessness, uddhacca, and the last one is ignorance, avijja. So that's the 10 fetters, which bind us to the wheel of becoming, to the wheel of samsara. And in the meditation, as we are practicing, we can identify them. And then through, being caught by these fetters, by these shackles, we experience ourselves and the world through these limited and limiting filters, which produce suffering on an individual and on a systemic level. And, as we are practicing here, really realizing the need to work with perception to support our returning to a larger picture, to step out of human supremacy thinking. And, letting go of this conditioning through seeing it clearly. And this list of the 10 fetters, is one way how we can identify that repetition compulsion, which keeps us bound, which keeps us pulled into identification again and again and again. And it's not about judging it, it's not about suppressing it, but it's about seeing it so clearly that it loses its grip on us. That is the approach of the Buddha, is through clear seeing of the conditionality. A letting go happens when the mind is ripe. And there's a really beautiful quote which is often at the end of suttas, which I've shared with you already, but I share it again, which relates to that. And I just read it out for you. Somebody who has just received a teaching in regards, to that falling away of wrong assumptions, falling away of the distortions of perception. And he says, "Magnificent Master Gautama, magnificent Master Gautama. The Dhamma has been made clear in many ways by Master Gautama, as though he were turning upright what had been turned upside down, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, or holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms." So that's what happens, if the mind is given the support to see those fetters in operation. And then there is the capacity to just drop it. And that's not something we are doing, but we are putting causes and conditions in place, and then the dropping of it happens by itself. And all what we are doing is to put causes and conditions in place, with the precepts, the refuges, the meditation practice, the sangha, the regular meeting, the regular practice. That's all putting causes and conditions in place, and then when the time is ripe, it just happens. And in this particular Wednesday earthworm gatherings, we are particularly targeting the wrong perception of assuming, that these bodies are separate from Earth, and that these bodies are walking around on the Earth like on a stage. But we support the mind to realize that these bodies are part of a living intelligent Earth, and they are a direct connection into Earth. And they are actually our communication line with Earth. So let's find a posture we can sustain for 35 minutes or so. And, sensing our body on the cushion on the chair, sensing it from inside, the weight of the body. And then also, seeing what are you bringing here today? And just landing, sensing the gravity of Earth, embracing us and showing us where we belong, as long as we have these Earth bodies. And helping us to return to a deeper place from which, wise action can emerge when we are ready for that. And joining in with so many other pockets of sanity all around the planet, which are springing up everywhere. And trusting that, trusting the possibility to receive guidance. As long as we are in right relationship with who we are and where we are and what's really happening. Peeling away these ancient filters, these perceptions of separation. But simply by making them conscious. That is enough. So returning to a relationship with Earth, which is real and from where we can practice this listening and recognizing of our deep belonging. And as I said many times, it's like learning a different language. Or maybe learning a language we once spoke and we forgot. A language which isn't word-based, but it's more visceral language, sensing language. So sensing, feeling into the aliveness, the vibrancy inside the body and around the body. Just different frequencies. Just allowing space. Whenever we notice that the mind gets pulled into, get caught in any of those fetters, those shackles, which keeps us bound to the wheel of becoming. If we're becoming the fearful one, or the dull one, or the worrying one, as soon as you're noticing it, coming back to being with that direct experience of the aliveness, the vibrancy, the presence of that which cannot be really named or pinned down in any way, because it's constantly arising and ceasing. And some of us might experience it also as a high-pitched sound, that vibrancy, that aliveness. And allowing the mind to rest on that in the same way as the body rests on the cushion on the chair, awareness rests on that aliveness. And at one point, we can't really pin down the difference between the awareness and the aliveness, because it is one and the same experience. It integrates, it's a fullness of potential. And in order to sense into that, there needs to be space. So that aliveness, which is before becoming something. So tuning to that mystery. In the beginning, there is like a hesitation, to really connect with that aliveness, and there is we get pulled into those shackles, those fetters, get pulled into identification with this and that because we have not yet developed the familiarity with that aliveness, that mystery, that, which doesn't have a clear definition because it's not a thing, but it's a potentiality, a fullness. It's the matrix, the womb from which things arise and cease back into. And to rest as that rather than getting pulled into being something. So that's how we can train the mind and the heart to open to that which comes through the cracks of the dying paradigm. Listening into those cracks with devotion and the wish to serve that which becomes conscious for our species now. And volunteering to be a place for that to land, to be a part of the immune system, to be a part of the immune response of Earth. Which is no longer capable, of indulging all of these crazy systems we have built. Because it simply is not doable for her. Because those systems are built on a wrong premise of domination, extraction, and total misunderstanding what this is all about. Appropriate to our immaturity, but now it's time to grow up. And the body knows how to do this because it has emerged out of earth and is never really separate from her. So that's why it is our gateway to this regulation. So whenever you notice, your mind gets shackled by one of those 10 fetters to get drawn into some kind of a story of identification with a lot of kindness, just noticing it and coming back to this aliveness. This aliveness, which we are an expression of. And we can become conscious of that and cultivate a conscious rapport with it. That's what we are trying to do here. Sensing it and allowing, giving space, and imagining ourselves inside of Earth, inside the womb of the mother, Really sensing in the body. Maybe there is a hesitation you can sense in your chest area, and bring the kindness to that opening, which is something which needs to be trained. So through sensing into that tenderness, the hesitation of the system to open, we are basically weakening the fetters. The repetition compulsion. So sensing the spaciousness, the silence, the vibrancy, the matrix, the womb, which has a different response than what has been enacted here in the Western world, at least in the global North, which has shifted gear, and we can sense that. The rub of that and the awe of that. It's not all about us. It's much more mysterious than that, what is underway. But we can surf it, we can become part of the immune response by letting go of those fetters and systematically thinning them out. So we have more capacity to act from this deeper knowing, which speaks to us on a visceral level and rewires us from the ground up if we invite it to, if we make space for it. So in 2 or 3 minutes I'm going to ring the bell. It's a new way of looking at who we are and where we are and how it is. That's a pith instruction from Pat McCabe, a woman stand shining, a Dinne ceremonial leader and international speaker. Who we are and where we are and how it is.